where do you see where we are now in this whole AI revolution? Are we just early innings, or how do you see this play out?
I think we're absolutely still in the very early innings. We're seeing strong demand across all our businesses. Even with the shortage of memory supply, we're seeing strong order load both on the device side and also on the infrastructure side, particularly on the infrastructure side. We're seeing that as long as you supply, you will have the demand.
The supply is certainly one thing. Given what we've been seeing in the crunch in memory chips, also rising component costs from this Iran war, do you see that impacting global PC shipments at all this year? And how are you weathering through some of these
Certainly,
prices?
the forecast has been that there would be a decline in the PC demand based on the expected price increases. I think what I have looked at the analysis, in the last 10 years, the global PC market has been generally not below 270 million units. And so I think there's a fundamental need for devices to engage, in particularly with AI and people really needing compute and interaction with AI. I think going forward, there will be a substantial demand for devices as well.
Helen, how concerned should we be about the supply risks out there? And should I be more concerned about supply or demand?
I think demand is not really a problem,
Yeah.
especially for the enterprise side, for anything related to AI. I mean, we've seen just the take-up is still very much in super early stages. On an enterprise level, even within the last 1 or 2 months, we ourselves and many other companies, I think, have started to experiment. And, that's with Claude Cowork, that's with the Claw, and so on and so forth, API, et cetera, still in very early stages. So that's not something that we're worried about. It's really the supply side. But supply side, I think most of the issues are more temporary and probably mostly, resolvable over time. Some of the products are starting to see very significant price crunch, like memory, for example, up 400-500% in the last quarter of last year. Very significant. Others, I think, is less of a price issue and more of just a volume of delivery issue. But within this process, what we see is that the bigger players are actually the ones who are getting all the resources. And that's why we actually see some market share consolidation, right? So clearly, if you are the biggest builder, you want to grab as many resources as possible. And the ones that you can rely on are the ones that have the most market share and the most supply chain support as well. So that's actually one trend that we're starting to see very clearly. And we do think that there will be still some idiosyncratic, this and that, maybe some components we've never even heard of before, suddenly out of supply for 1 or 2 quarters to delay certain projects.
Yeah.
But the market's looking through that at the bigger picture and the longer term TAM opportunity.
Hey, Winston, this is Avel in Singapore joining in as well. You highlight how, maybe demand not an issue. It's really the supply side risks perhaps we should be a bit more concerned about. We're still in the midst of this memory chip crunch. How long do you see that persisting for? And to what extent is it maybe being compounded by the situation in the Middle East, if at all?
Well, I think there's two questions. One is the demand-driven supply constraints. The other one is the war. I also answer the second question first. With respect to the war, we haven't seen that affect the global supply chain, except for shipments to the region, of course. I think that's a clear indication of the direct impact. But otherwise, the global supply chain is not impacted by the war. We are building a plant there for the region, but we can currently supply to the broader region through other supply chains as we are diversified across all 5 major continents, across all our products in terms of desktops, PCs, mobile phones, and servers. With respect to the demand-driven, we're seeing the rate of that price increase starting to come down because you are seeing that the demand-driven side, which is really the hyperscalers, spending now a lot portion of their cash flow. Right, it's getting close to 100% of the annual cash flow on CapEx, and I think they're starting to be pushed back as it relates to the increasing price increases.
So what else is being done to perhaps buffer the supply chain a bit more, mitigate in some ways the China-related risk? I mean, we've been talking about the Middle East related concerns, but that's kind of sidelined some of these other issues as well that we've been preoccupied about for the past year or so, including tariffs.
In terms of what we have done is really addressing the global supply chain, bringing that supply chain close to the demand. And so, as I said earlier, we are able to produce in various regions, particularly on the server side, in Europe, for Europe, in Mexico, and of course also within North America, other areas as well. In terms of the Asia region, we also have that capability. Of course, we're building in Riyadh for the Meta region. So I think from that perspective, very, very much diversified. And I think that will be an advantage as it relates to providing to the end customer, as hyperscalers need to be global in terms of their capacity as we engage with their customers as well.
How do you look at margins right now? I mean, obviously, there's been pressure from memory chips and component costs, but do you see room for margin expansion? What are the opportunities?
Yeah, certainly on the server side, again, the demand is largely driven from the server side in terms of our ISG business. So I think on that side, when there's the demand and supply imbalance, you are able to pass through the cost. But with respect to the device side, we're being cautious on that front. But obviously, in our sector, we don't have that ability to pass on or to absorb that increase. So we do need to try our best to pass on that cost as well.
You mentioned this transition you're going in ISG. When can I start to see when you in terms of really capital allocation? You know, it all used to be cloud before, but now you're looking into enterprise AI and the like. When am I likely to see that sort of capital shift massively more to this new side of the business?
We're already seeing that in terms of the industry. Certainly within Lenovo, in the past couple of weeks, there's been investments as it relates to N-scale.
Yeah.
And of course, yesterday, in terms of another filing here in Hong Kong, in terms of a component for the ISG business. So as it relates to that, as part of the ecosystem, these partners come to us as a major player in the server space to engage both on the technology side and as a partnership in terms of a supplier perspective to ensure that we'd have that alignment. So I think from that perspective, we're absolutely deploying capital to this space.
Helen, this is all coming at a time where, as we watch these AI developments, we're also watching how hardware makers integrate it into their systems, perhaps not just for Lenovo, for the likes of Apple as well, at a time where it's going through a leadership transition. What are you seeing in these businesses, and how do you put that as part of the equation when you look at tech?
Well, I think, as mentioned, everything's still in very early stages of adoption, and I think people are all racing for, the next big thing, right? And even year to date, we've seen so many innovations and new products roll out that we really didn't imagine even just a number of months ago. And it's being disruptive, it's being innovative, it's helping to improve productivity, it's helping to save costs over the medium to longer term as well. So we think the adoption potential is huge. We actually look at this in terms of really the medium to longer term, right? What the terminal value might look like for these companies. And I think what the market has formed a view on is that any companies that could be potentially AI disruptors over the medium to longer term are actually going to be derated in the market. And people are just going to say, I don't know whether it's going to be disrupted, but every day that passes, we're getting closer and closer to that risk, right? So you don't actually want to invest into these companies and play them for the small bounces that are coming on the back of like the beta rally or the short covering. You just want to kind of pivot towards the potential winners. And right now, I think it's really the picks and shovels and the infrastructure that's continuously getting upward revisions. And that's probably the most sure bet in terms of this AI trade.
What's impressed you the most about or surprised you the most maybe about the level of disruption that we're seeing, particularly when it comes to software? I mean, is there anything that really stood out to you on just how quickly things have been able to grow and the ability of the productivity gains and really the automation that you're seeing that could really change any industry? I mean, what's impressed you the most, I guess?
I mean, I think even just like back 2 or 3 quarters ago, a lot of these things were hypothetical, right?
Yes.
I remember I was in the Valley in November of last year talking to a lot of super smart people about agentic commerce and whether, end-to-end transactions can happen this year. And half the people thought, oh no, because of security and technology and business model reasons, nothing's going to happen in 2026. And here we are, OpenClaw doing all these transactions left, right, and center, and it's going to become very, very commonplace very soon, right? In terms of the actual adoption in the workplace as well, we're, marching forward at very rapid speed, and many other companies are going even faster. So I think a lot of this stuff has really taken us by surprise. A lot of native AI applications that we saw last year that were really in the forefront are now even being disrupted by the LLM because they're now going into these verticals themselves as well. So again, completely unprecedented and unexpected.
I'll ask the same question to you, Winston. How are you yourself using and interacting with AI now, and how do you see that changing the next 5 years?
Over the last year, I probably use AI now on a daily basis, versus in the past you are maybe at best weekly.
Yeah.
But now it's definitely multiple times daily, and I think in terms of running deep analysis or even going before a meeting, or even before the Bloomberg interviews, you would actually ask AI for some of the potential analysis in the industry, and it's actually quite good. And I think the hallucination is getting much better. You still have to know your industry and things, and so therefore really question and double check a couple of different AI tools, which is what I do these days. But otherwise, I think we're moving at incredible speeds.